Whenever we begin to talk about something like the political landscape, the first question that arises is, what landscape are we really talking about? The United States, as it has evolved over the hundreds of years, has had completely different landscapes, and we've also had regional landscapes. When we talk about a landscape today, we're talking about a landscape that is local to your school board, it's local to your city, to your town, to your state, as well as to the national government. We are in a period almost like no other in history, where through immigration, the changes in demographics of family, of people living older, of more young people going to work, more young people being educated, that we have a quite different landscape of America as well as a political landscape than we did at the time that people first came to America. So that we now have several fairly large states, including California, where traditional Caucasian majorities are now in the minority. At one point we were anticipating that we would become a majority minority country by 2050. Now we're looking at it happening by 2030. So that the American political landscape is becoming one that is no longer one of white elites, and is becoming one that is far more diverse, and we are going to have political solutions that are quite different than we've had to have in past years to accommodate the changing nature of what really is the political landscape. And when we look at the political landscape, the one thing we can never forget is every era or every decade or almost every year, we have changing views of what we want government to do. When times are good, we don't want government involved. When times are bad, even some people who say they don't like big government or a lot of government intrusion are some of the first people to look to government to help solve their problems. Because in the United States, the document that the framers ultimately came up with to govern us plays very heavily on individual rights. That is a different framework than existed from the countries that they came from. We believe that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that all men and women are created equal, and therefore given this level playing field that doesn't exist, but in theory does exist, everyone should be able to grow up and be president of the United States.
I think that government is something that should be keeping order in a state or country.
Keep order. Make sure that we don't go willy-nilly and just start killing each other in its basic form. Have basic laws to keep society running smoothly.
Like a little amount of people speaking for a lot of people.
Okay, so basically government is there for our best interests, like so that we can advance ourselves, happiness, life of liberty, pursuit of happiness, brotherhood. And also to regulate, because there are always issues like crime, and wouldn't want total anarchy.
17th century theorist John Locke argued that people living in a state of nature would agree to form a government for the protection of their lives, liberty, and property. This idea motivated the founders. They believed that the authority of government arose from the people. This idea is known as popular sovereignty. They argue that the legitimacy of government is tied to its ability to carry out specific functions, to promote the general welfare of the people, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, and to provide common defense.
Freedom to vote for what we want. It should be the people's choice as to what happens and what gets enacted. That's the theory. That's what we all believe
freedom is the big one, I think. If you grow up in the slums, you're you know, you work really hard in school, you go to college, you know, full scholarship, and you know, you major in being a lawyer, and then you become rich, and you can do that in America, apparently.
When we look carefully at the American dream, we can find core American values that shape our political system. These are equality of opportunity, protection of personal liberties, like the freedom of religion or free speech, government by popular consent, individualism, and a free market.
I guess it's like the idea is promoted that America is a melting pot, and I think that's a really important thing to know, is that all the different cultures in America, like, everyone should be united, and there should be no discrimination or racism. And
Like, what is, I don't know, like, who are Americans? You know, it's a good question. I guess I can't even think that way. I mean, who are I mean, when I think of Americans, it's hard to say also because we live in, you know, New York City, and I feel like we have a very different view of who Americans are.
Americans are diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, heritage, and religion. Americans also have regional differences that affect the way we talk or interpret behavior. But there are some basic characteristics that we can point to. For example, over the past century and a half, Americans have moved away from rural areas and into the cities. In recent decades, Americans are aging. The median age is going up as the baby boomers grow older. And minorities are growing, with the Hispanic population now making up over 20% of the population. These changes have profound effects for American government, as each of these groups has different values, political expectations, and needs.
Well, I think what happened in the study of democratic theories is a lot of time spent on institutions in the past, historically, looking at who votes and how they vote in Congress. That institutional focus, I think, has shifted more recently to trying to understand what happens with the people. And you know, we can look at something like an Occupy Wall Street movement, or the protests during the Vietnam War, or even the protests against the more recent Iraq War, is examples of the people rising up. But a continuous thread in American politics is the people's insertion into deliberation through their associations. Now, when Tocqueville identified associations as a unique feature of American politics, he pointed out something that we're fascinated by today, which is that people gathered together. This freedom of association means that they gather together and they deliberate together to get the ideas that they want to insert into American politics about education, or about healthcare, or about foreign policy. That scholars of American politics are fascinated by this practice of deliberation within associations. Many people who study American politics are interested in the question of voting, as if voting were the main thing that the American people should do. There is a way that government and practice of politics could be reduced to voting. That we know that a democracy is healthy whether or not people are voting. But the healthiness of a democracy is not about voting. It's about the deliberation and the conversation and the arguments that happen before you get to the booth. It's your activity in civic organizations. It's your participation in school boards and other institutions of American politics. That this idea that voting, which gives you the elected representative who then will think for you and act for you, I think is actually not right any longer, and that scholars of American politics are concerned with this deeper democracy which has been percolating, and they should be, and that we as citizens should be interested in that too.
Governments provide a wide variety of public goods and services, but people disagree about what these should be and how best to deliver them. For example, the Constitution states one function of the federal government is to provide for the general welfare. Does this include education? Historically, it hasn't. In the 19th century, state and local governments began setting up public education. Then, in the 20th century, the federal government began to provide grants to states to promote math and science education. Then, in 2002, Congress passed the No Child Left Behind law. To receive grants, states would have to design and implement standardized testing. If a school failed to perform adequately on the tests, students could choose to go to another school, the staff could be replaced, or the entire school could be closed. So the question is, should government require standardized testing?
I think it's just a great idea that they take the standardized test so teachers know how to teach their students in general, know what's their strengths and what's their weakness.
I believe it's up to the government, because I believe that every child should have an opportunity to have an equal education as much as the others. I don't think that the families should have that decision or the ability to make that decision, because it could, stunt a child's growth. They might not learn as much as some of the other children, and therefore not have as much of an opportunity in the future.
These are exactly the arguments that people make in support of standardized testing. They believe that it will improve the quality of education. They hope that by establishing a standard curriculum, it equalizes access to education. They believe that it increases accountability. But not everybody agrees with these points. Let's find out why.
I think that everybody learns differently, and I think that often standardized tests, they kind of require a very specific kind of learning. I kind of think that standardized tests in general are misleading, because there are different types of intelligence that can't necessarily be measured by multiple choice questions.
I just don't feel that the federal government should have total control over everything. Their safety, technology, military, things like that, understandable, but the way we educate our children, I just don't feel the federal government should have total control over that.
These are also legitimate points. Many people feel that the federal government should not be dictating to local communities what should and should not be taught. Others feel that standardized tests are not a fair measure of achievement. Finally, standardized tests have also been criticized because they raise concerns that schools will teach to the test and thus discourage the development of critical thinking skills. We can look at the issue more closely by analyzing the costs and benefits. Since 2002, the U.S. has slipped from 18th in the world in math to 31st, with similar drops in science and virtually no change in reading. The question is, would we have dropped further if we had not implemented standardized testing, or might we have done better? Standardized tests provide useful information at low costs. They're typically $2 a test, but there are larger costs associated with creating standards and reporting systems, and with implementing the procedures. Some states have just opted out. Can we change the testing system so that we improve the quality of education? Should this even be a responsibility of the federal government? If not, how can the state and local communities work to provide a good education to all its members?
Up in America today is a fascinating experience if you fully appreciate what is really going around in terms of the American political landscape. I'm assuming that most of you have had or continue to have grandparents. They're making demands on the government in terms of better pensions, better health care. They're living longer. Originally, when the framers were writing the Constitution, people lived to age 40 or 45. Now, if grandma or grandpa dies before 85, it's a tragedy. So government, which allows people to retire at 65, is paying a lot longer than it ever did. Well, who's paying for that? Well, young people are, from the minute they take a part-time job to a full-time job, are going to have to be putting lots more money into a Social Security system to guarantee that grandma and grandpa get paid, but we still don't know how much the younger people are going to be able to get out of a governmental system, since we have fewer younger workers than we once had older workers. We also have young people putting demands on government that we really haven't had before. Young people are demanding the ability to go to college, and with that, the ability to be able to pay for a college education. Various states have made rules recently guaranteeing a particular cost over 4 years for school. We've seen moves by the government to make certain that interest rates and loans don't bankrupt students who graduate from college with debts over $100,000, which is more than many people's mortgage payments. Young people are asking government on a regular basis, what are you doing for us? And as an individualist government, many times those are things that are quite personal to an individual student or a family. You need to understand what has happened in the past to learn about what might happen in the future. You need to be able to be grounded in an understanding of how government works, so you'll understand how government works for you, or be excited enough to go out and learn how government works for you beyond what you're learning in the classroom in your assignments.